Picture a bad guy who's mastered the art of manipulation so effectively that nobody can see his true colors up until the moment that he himself throws his mask away. Prince Hans of the Southern Isles managed to pull this off. Disney's 2013 film Frozen dove deep into the concepts of feelings. In Hans, we see a complete and utter absence of them. Does this make him an effective twist villain, or does the twist come off as a cheat? You see, Hans managed to stay on the sidelines of the film right up until the time that the twist was played. Most people in the audience, myself included, were far too busy focusing on the Duke of Weselton, who we thought would be the antagonist of the film. And even when the truth became apparent, I thought Hans was pretty ineffectual. It wasn't until I dissected the personality of Hans that I realized why there were a lot of parts that made him a brilliant antagonist and custom-tailored for the setting of the film, because, in truth, Hans is a sociopath, and this is what makes his villainy so effective. Hans isn't just a regular narcissistic villain who's scheming and plotting for personal power. No, he's icy on the inside. People of this sort don't just twist and warp their presentation of themselves. They also twist and warp other people's beliefs and perceptions until those meet their personal gain. It's actually pretty ruthless. But despite their outwardly charming persona, sociopaths are pretty easy to detect. Their true nature becomes exceedingly apparent when we observe their behavior. All twist villains have some kind of psychological disorder. This writing tool facilitates the playout of their manipulation and deception. The reason Disney used Prince Hans of the Southern Isles for Frozen, though, is actually pretty interesting. So, did all this make Hans a perfectly written twist villain? Or did Disney decide on the twist reveal at the last moment? There are subtle hints peppered throughout the film that suggest that he was a twisted force of evil, but they're a bit too subtle to grasp, leaving the story to move forward in a way that felt more of an expedited resolution than the natural ending it was heading for. I think it could have been done a bit better, which I'll explain later. But first, to understand what I mean, we'll go back to where everything takes place.
This icy force, both foul and fair, has a frozen harbor mighty.
Disney's 2013 film Frozen takes place in the city of Arendelle. This is a sea-facing kingdom that's surrounded by mountains and valleys. That is, of course, until Elsa freezes it all. In the beginning of the movie, we watch her and her sister play together in the snow, laughing and sliding on ice. They're celebrating Elsa's magical powers. Then Elsa accidentally hits Anna in the head with a beam of snow. A lock of Anna's brown hair turns blonde, and the king and queen of Arendelle carry their daughters to what are perhaps the only magical creatures they know, a bunch of rock trolls. The trolls remove Anna's memories of Elsa's magic in order to protect her. They also inform the king and queen that Elsa's powers must be protected.
You must learn to control it. Fear will be your enemy.
As you already know, Elsa and her parents are so terrified of the danger of this magic that they misunderstand what the troll has said. So Elsa moves into a room away from her sister and grows up in great fear of her powers. In everyone's efforts to conceal these powers from Anna, something colder than ice is created: silence. Elsa shuts Anna off for several years without any explanation. Psychologically, this kind of behavior is considered abusive. While Elsa does so inadvertently, her actions take a blow to Anna's self-esteem. At first, Anna tries to seek resolution with Elsa. She is confused, baffled even by the fact that her sister doesn't want to play with her. Over time, though, she gives up. But rather than rejecting her sister for doing something so cold and ruthless, whether she meant to or not, Anna rejects herself. In this way, Elsa's abandonment of her sister and the dissolution of love and warmth between them lays the perfect ground for the grand scheme of Hans to fester.
Beware the frozen heart.
In Frozen, Disney tried to explain that the freezing of the heart can create deep psychological wounds within people. This becomes especially apparent when someone like Olaf, who is quite literally snow, expresses a desire for warm hugs. It is not his outward build, but rather his inner nature that is warm. Also, as most of you may already be aware, Olaf is actually a personification of Anna's childhood self. This becomes clear when he acts like Anna, and especially when he talks about the sky.
Look, Sven, the sky's awake.
Sound familiar, anyone?
The sky's awake, so I'm awake.
The reason this makes so much sense is because when Prince Hans asks Anna to marry him, she immediately accepts.
Will you marry me?
Yes!
It's not because she's desperate to get away from Arendelle. It's because she's desperate for love. A lot of discussion has been done on Anna's naivete, but considering the fact that her sister and best friend coldly shut her out, Anna wasn't really at fault. She didn't have a therapist. She didn't have anyone with whom she could explore the hurt of her sister's abandonment. And really, she was just lonely. She just wanted warm hugs. And sociopaths have a special radar for people of these sorts. Sociopaths and energy vampires typically use their victims to grow their own self-esteem. In Anna's case, however, what Prince Hans wanted was something else. The funny part was that his true intentions were hinted at very early on, but his charm was so carefully constructed that we missed it. We can take notes from this, shroud the villain in charm to make suggestions about their true nature imperceptible. Before we move on to Hans's motives though, let's take a look at his backstory, or lack thereof.
What's his last name?
Of the Southern Isles.
The reason Hans is such a well-written twist villain is that we know as little about him as Anna does. What's his last name? No idea. Best friend's name? Like Anna said, probably John.
Best friend's name?
Probably John.
All we know about Hans, other than the fact that he likes sandwiches, is that he has 12 older brothers. Because of this, he's very far down the line for kingship. While I was originally annoyed at the fact that Disney left out Hans's backstory, I realized that this was deliberate. And speaking of Hans, the reason he made for such an unexpected sociopathic twist is because of the absence of an origin story. And he makes sure that we don't find out on purpose. Sociopaths deliberately unveil very little about themselves to their victims. This is done in order to maintain the balance of power in their relationship. By disclosing very little about themselves, they are able to maintain detachment. Furthermore, a sociopath will only tell you as much about themselves as will evoke sympathy. I mean, 12 brothers? Poor chap. He'll never make it to the throne. Hans also uses his backstory to quickly engage Anna's sympathy. He tells her that because he has so many brothers, he's felt invisible for the longest time, and that his brothers even bullied him.
3 of them pretended I was invisible, literally, for 2 years.
Throughout the film, we can clearly see that Anna is quite an empathetic person. For one, she's very nice to Kristoff. Then, she dances with a silly old duke in an effort to not offend him. And she refuses to tell Olaf that he would melt in the heat. She doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Sociopaths hunt for people like these. By quickly engaging Anna's sympathies, Hans manages to also gain her trust. This furthers his scheme brilliantly, because an empath will always care more for a person if they believe that that person has been hurt in the past. Anna leaves Arendelle in charge of Prince Hans. From her perspective, it's an effort to show him that she loves and trusts him. But he doesn't quite want love and trust. Anyone who's on the spectrum for antisocial personality disorder will always act as though they want to be loved and cared for. In truth, however, their motives are always sinister. In Hans's case, the motive is power. And he's ready to kill, not once, but twice, in order to achieve this goal. Let's take a closer look at this, shall we? I mentioned before that Hans's true intentions were revealed early on in the film. His graceful and charismatic demeanor, however, eclipsed what was right there in front of us.
I've been searching my whole life to find my own place.
He literally told us this 24 minutes into the film. I wish that we, or Anna at least, would have caught on. Hans is ready to lie, manipulate, warp others' perceptions, and even murder to get what he wants. What I don't understand, however, is why he didn't do this to his own family. I mean, couldn't he have manipulated his brothers into giving up the kingdom? There are a few explanations for this. First of all, the reason that Hans couldn't capture the kingship in the Southern Isles is likely that he couldn't lay out his deceptive bag of tricks there. If he had grown up there, everyone would know too much about him for him to be able to manipulate and deceive his way to the throne. A sociopath always needs to construct a charismatic demeanor based on deceit in order to play out their game. That wasn't possible in that particular setting. Furthermore, since he was evidently the youngest, it would have been a lot harder to fool his older brothers, people who had quite literally raised him to be a man. But what if all of that was a lie? Hans desperately wanted to be a king, and given his personality, he would obviously have a grandiose perception of self. What if he wasn't a prince, but rather a random guy who dreamt of one day owning a kingdom? I know that Hans has all the mannerisms and graces of a prince, but this is just a theory that I have. Please let me know what you all think. I'd love to explore this further in the comments. Whether Hans was truly a prince or not, it's clear that he wanted to be a king. Arendelle was such a great target because the king and queen had been deceased for 3 years and the princesses weren't all that fit to rule. I say this with a heavy heart, but it's true. Elsa and Anna had so little exposure to the outside world that they couldn't possibly be expected to see through the true motives of others. In fact, Elsa isn't just deceived by Hans, which we see happening near the end of the film, she's also deceived by someone as explicitly sneaky as the old Duke. It's obviously clear that Hans targeted Arendelle for his coup with a lot of meticulous plotting. This is made evident by the fact that he arrives in Arendelle on the day of Elsa's coronation as queen. And while he introduces himself as a prince, he fails to elucidate how he's acquainted with this kingdom. In the entrance scene of Hans, we can see that he's pleased by how things are panning out. It's not made evident, however, just how big of a role luck played in his evil plans. We first got introduced to Hans 17 minutes into the film. In retrospect, his first introduction should have made clear that he was up to no good. This is because he bumps into Anna with his horse and she falls sideways into a raft at the dock. The reason this struck me as strange is that Hans should have been able to see Anna walking down that path. And even if he didn't see her, I mean, she's singing at the top of her lungs. He should have been able to hear her, at least. I think that Hans bumped his horse into Anna deliberately, considering the other characters that we catch glimpses of in the village or marketplace earlier. Anna is clearly dressed like royalty. So Hans perhaps knew that he was dealing with someone important and engineered a little accident so that he could swoop in and act like a hero. He's also obviously sprinkling his charm onto Anna straight away. His movements are slow and deliberate here, and there's a masquerade of sophisticated warmth. Here, he managed to fool every single one of us. No one would believe from this interaction, his clumsy, sweet little run-in with Princess Anna at the dock, that he was anything other than a handsome young man with a poor sense of coordination. He delivered this whole stunt masterfully. Although, in an effort to understand Prince Hans, I've watched this scene several times. He's too warm. There's no crack in the surface. There's nothing that suggests that he's anything other than a young man who's immediately besotted with Anna. Apart from the clumsiness, he seems perfect. Maybe Hans was written a tad too smooth. No, it's not until he meets Anna in the ballroom and in the musical sequence that follows that we first begin to suspect that something else might be going on. Even in the song where Hans clearly love bombs Anna, his deception is pretty hard to discern.
I would never shut you out.
I mean, dude, you haven't even known the girl for 7 minutes at this point. Literally. What do you mean? You're that concerned for her well-being? The reason Hans managed to play out his villainous plot so brilliantly in Frozen, though, is that he capitalized on Disney's mistakes. See, up until Frozen, there had only been one incident of Disney discrediting love at first sight. It happened in the 2007 film Enchanted, but even that wasn't strictly animated cinema. Hans managed to fool Anna and, by extension, all of us, because we were all still quite open to the idea of recognizing a soulmate when we met them. The chilling part, pun intended, about all this is that sociopaths use this well-intentioned but wholly ill-conceived idea to deceive their victims all the time. Someone who's codependent is typically so starved of love and has such a broken self-esteem that they'd lap up the first offering of it. They would swallow it whole. That's exactly what Anna does. It doesn't take long for cracks to start to appear in the outwardly pristine surface of Hans's personality. It's just that there's so much going on that neither we nor Anna were able to notice it.
Wait, would we live here? Here?
Absolutely!
I mean, what exactly is going on over here? Why would a prince want to abandon his kingdom in order to live somewhere else? It makes his motives quite clear, but we just shrugged it off as cringe. Elsa spots danger immediately, and I've got to give her credit for that because she hasn't interacted enough with the world to know what's going on. But her refusal to bless Anna and Hans's marriage seems to be based on matters of principle rather than disdain towards Hans as a person. Writing tip, and I think this one's brilliant, cover a crack in the twist villain's surface with the plot. Because things move quickly to Elsa's rejection and Anna's argument with her sister, we failed to fully register what Hans had said. Despite being the very vision of charm, Hans continued to demonstrate his agenda throughout the duration of the film. This becomes evident through his actions, although you might need to do a rewatch to see it. I for sure had to. This brings up some questions about Hans's writing though. While it's incredible that a villain needs to be cross-examined through multiple replays in order to be understood, there could perhaps have been more red flags for Anna to discern. Before we go any further into Hans's actions, I'd like to ask you all another question. Do you think that Disney really meant to apologize for furthering the idea of love at first sight for all these years? Or do you think they pivoted from this notion in order to give Hans a playing field? What shortcomings did you see in the way that Hans was written? How could he have been done differently? I thought that, rather than a song, a prolonged conversation between him and Anna could have helped establish more grounds for his deception. But then again, he's a sociopath. I'm sure he'd just charm his way through that. I'm eager to read your opinions about this in the comments. When Anna leaves Hans in charge of Arendelle, he takes ownership of the position immediately. This is made evident by him giving out blankets and distributing hot meals to the subjects of the kingdom.
He left me in charge, and I will not hesitate to protect Arendelle from treason.
Furthermore, he leads a group of people to go and find Anna. The reason his actions were so brilliantly placed is that they play in perfectly with his role as a master manipulator. While his dialogues and their chargeable delivery of them indicate that Hans is settling nicely into the position of leading Arendelle, they also fool us into thinking that he's sincere. He's quite cunning and strategic. Later on, it is revealed that Hans has managed to brilliantly craft the image of a leader. This is made apparent by the fact that what appears to be the Parliament is now seeking counsel from him while the Queen is still alive. He further manages to convince Elsa that she is not fit to be queen. Not only does he make it seem as though he hasn't ordered the arrest of a monarch, despite having no claim to the throne, he also makes Elsa think that he has Arendelle's best interests at heart. He does so by asking her to bring back the summer.
But you see, I can't.
Whoa, man, that was a mind-bender. Again, none of this would have been possible if Elsa had strong self-esteem and believed in herself. She would have seen how ridiculous it was that she, the queen, was under arrest and someone who didn't even belong to Arendelle was out there acting like he owned it. Hans revealed his true self when Anna was about to die. It wasn't the snow that the land was covered in, but rather this dialogue that chilled us to the bone.
Oh, Anna. If only there was someone out there who loved you.
Hans wanted to marry into the royal family of Arendelle in order to lay claim to the throne, but Elsa was unapproachable. This made Anna the second best candidate for his evil scheme. What was truly sinister, however, was this. Now that Anna was dying and Hans had already proclaimed a place as the de facto king, he was ready to kill her. Hans didn't attempt to strike Anna with a sword. No, he did that to Elsa. With Anna, he just doused out the little warmth that she had left. So wickedly clever was this man that when he went to the regal council, he told them that he'd already married Anna. This would remove any remaining doubts about his claim to the throne. Sociopaths are naturally deceptive and cold at the heart. They don't have the capacity to empathize with other people's feelings, have little to no regard for the well-being of others, and will go to extreme lengths to maintain their image and achieve their goals. Hans's true nature was somewhat hinted at in his character design, especially when held in comparison to other characters in the film. And speaking of character design,
I'm awkward. You're gorgeous. Wait, what?
I thought that Disney was trying to shed light on the sad fact that people only like to surround themselves with people who seem to be put together, rather than who they are as a person. That is why Anna is immediately attracted to Prince Hans. It's pitiful, but it's definitely something that the human race is guilty of. Prince Hans of the Southern Isles was tall and broad-shouldered. He had long, stylish sideburns and a sharp jawline. This was meant to hint at his narcissistic nature. He carries himself with grace and elegance in order to maintain an aura of magnetism. It's called the halo effect. When we think someone is one good thing, for example, good-looking, we tend to automatically assign other good qualities to them. Narcissists and sociopaths understand this, and they leverage this psychological tool to get people to overlook hints at their true nature. Another thing that played well into Hans's role as a twist villain was his outfit. Throughout the film, he was dressed in regal white attire with intricate gold designs on the borders. Like I mentioned before in my video about Ernesto, these colors are perfect for a twist villain. This is because they signify purity and opulence, which prevents us from seeing through the character until the twist is revealed. This especially makes sense when you examine the character in contrast with overtly evil characters like Maleficent and the Queen from Snow White, both of whom were dressed in black. Hans also has a sharp nose, which points not only toward his cunning, but also his ability to sniff out codependents, empaths, and people with low self-esteem. He knows who and when to target for his villainous scheme. The last part about him that foreshadowed his true nature was the fact that Prince Hans wore gloves. Considering the setting of the film, this was especially revealing. I mean, who wears gloves in the middle of the summer? What are they trying to hide? As a lot of you are likely aware, the clue lay in another character in the film, another person who had a secret.
Conceal it.
Don't feel it.
Don't let it show.
But for Elsa, the gloves signified secret magic and fear. For Hans, they meant a cold detachment from emotion that is typical of sociopaths. A lot of people thought that Hans' ownership of Arendelle indicated that despite being an evil person, he would have been a good king for the realm. I have some opinions on that. Before I dive into my analysis of this though, I have a question. Were sideburns really trending in the Middle Ages? I thought they were a relatively newer fashion, especially since none of the other characters in Arendelle seem to have them, except for the guy at the inn, and he hardly seems to be fashion forward. Do let me know your thoughts. So, considering that Hans couldn't have been the king of the Southern Isles by simple virtue of birth order, and the fact that he seemed to be dedicated to the role, is he redeemable? I think we shouldn't fall for that. It's another attempt at manipulation that this masterful deceiver has unrolled. See, the only time we saw Hans do anything good for the kingdom was when he was giving away blankets that didn't belong to him and food that didn't come from his personal resources. It's pretty clear that it was a strategic attempt at positioning himself as the leader of the land. By making the subjects of Arendelle feel as though he had their best interests at heart, he was able to turn them against Elsa. By winning over their hearts, he was able to win the mandate. Although he wouldn't have been voted for, Hans made sure that even if there were a democracy, he would be elected the leader. By doing this, not only did he demonstrate power, he also managed to quell any and all chances at an uprising. In contrast to the royal sisters, who kept the gates of the castle closed, he opened them. Writing tip: have your twist villain take strategic initiative to acquire power, but portray it as well-intentioned. I thought it was cunning to an incredible degree. But no, I don't think this redeemed him. This becomes especially clear when we look at Hans in contrast to Elsa. Elsa was sick of her role as the good girl, who shied away from her powers and stepped into her parents' shoes as a monarch. But her dissatisfaction with her position in life caused her to run away. She didn't hurt anyone. Hans, on the other hand, was ready to kill not one, but two people in order to rule over a kingdom that didn't even belong to him in the first place. He was ridiculously clever, I'll give him that. But Hans was also incredibly lucky. If Anna and Elsa hadn't had a fight, Hans's scheme to take over Arendelle would have been a lot more protracted. He would have needed to be a lot more patient in order to achieve his goals. And considering the nature of sociopaths, we'd have seen him do a lot more horrible things than the ones that he did in a film made for children. Prince Hans might have furthered his agenda with a commendable degree of tactical precision, but that does not absolve him of the grueling nature of the crimes that he tried to commit. There's one more thing that I'd like to note here, though.
Only an act of true love can thaw a frozen heart.
Anna doesn't receive an act of true love. Rather, she performs it by trying to give up her life for her sister. And I mean, Elsa does give her a warm hug, but I thought there was another message there. See, the way to thaw a frozen heart is through an act of true love, and Hans' heart is definitely frozen. But what if he could only have changed, or his heart could only have thawed, if he learned to love? I definitely think that I'm onto something here. As always, however, what do you guys have to say about this? Hans meets his demise in two parts. First, Anna is ready to sacrifice her life for her sister. As I was just saying, this is an act of true love. It casts off a magical beam that pushes Hans to the ground. But that's not all. Hans really meets his demise when Anna regains her self-esteem and realizes that she is worthy of true love. Even in this instance, Hans tries to manipulate Anna.
But she froze your heart.
But Anna is not having any of that now. It is then that she pushes him off the ship. When the hollow space in Anna's heart, the one that makes her desperate, turns to a sense of deservingness, she is able to make Hans irrelevant. In truth, this is death to a sociopath, realizing that they no longer have the ability to influence other people. All in all, Hans was a psychotic twist villain who employed great precision, deliberation, and care into cultivating a captivating persona. He managed to convince other people of his goodness for his personal gains. The man feigned sincerity and care for the entire first half of the film, and then met his demise by the very thing that he was incapable of doing: love. That actually makes me feel a little sorry for him. Throughout the film, Hans managed to charm and influence, but he never managed to win love, and he never managed to love in return. That is why he never got what he wanted. If Hans truly wanted a place as a respected member of a royal family, dating and marrying a princess could have been a way to go. And Anna already liked him enough to think that he was her one true love. She would have cared for him for the rest of her life, and he would have had a real home. What I'm trying to say is that Hans didn't need to exploit, coerce, and mislead the world. He could have had a pretty decent life if he had just checked his ego and created a bit of room for love somewhere in that wide chest of his. To write a character who pursued power in a way that would put Machiavelli to shame, it's important to remember the Sun Tzu quote, "All war is based on deception." That's what Disney carefully knitted into every single action of this underhanded villain. It wasn't his agenda that was scary, nor his attempts to kill that shocked, but the proficiency of Hans's ugly guile. The writing of Hans was brilliantly done and wove in exceptionally well with the message of the film. However, I still think that it was a bit too smooth to be anything but accidental. But maybe Hans is too crafty for us all. There were signs at first, maybe it was us that missed them. No, we're not falling for that. That's exactly what sociopaths do. They make us doubt ourselves for trusting in them rather than making us be angry at them for daring to fool us. This guy was either far too brilliant or inadvertently written and twisted at the 11th hour. If you'd like for me to pick apart other Disney and DreamWorks villains, please send your suggestions my way. And if you enjoyed this video, as always, please remember to like and share with your friends and loved ones, which Hans, by the way, had none of. Until next time, bye!